This is the video demonstration on inventory valuation. And in this video, I'm going to be working the solution to example number 5. Now this example involves the Evans Company. And it says that they had the following transactions in the month of March involving both purchases and sales of inventory. And we see 6 different transactions here that occurred. Now, what are the requirements for this example? Number 1, we're going to have to calculate the cost of goods sold under the FIFO, LIFO, and weighted average methods. Secondly, we're going to have to calculate the cost of goods sold using the specific identification method. And along with that, they're giving us some specific information about which units were actually sold. And then on part 3, we're going to compute the gross profit earned under each of the 4 inventory valuation methods. Now the purpose behind this is to actually overcome a problem in accounting. And the problem is that we buy inventory and sometimes we pay different prices for the inventory. And yet the inventory is usually stored in the same location. So sometimes it gets intermingled and it's sometimes difficult to tell which units are the ones that we paid certain prices for. So whenever we have that problem, we have to come up with a way of evaluating our inventory to overcome that. And of course, we had a video lecture where we talked about that. And I said in that lecture that there were 4 possible methods. And all 4 of these are GAAP approved. So GAAP allows us to use any of the 4. But because different businesses have different preferences, it's good to know all 4 of them. So that's what this example is going to help us do. It's going to give us some hands-on practice on how to use all 4 of these methods. And we're going to be using this information. It's going to be the same information for all 4 methods, but in spite of that, we will actually get a slightly different answer each time. Now, to solve this problem, I'm going to utilize Excel, and there are going to be certain things that I have set up ahead of time. And I did this basically just to save time. And like I've said in many other videos, you could do a problem like this in Excel. You could do this on paper. There's many different ways to do this, but I just tend to use Excel because I think it makes it a little bit easier for you to see the solution. Now what I've done here is I've set up 4 columns. I have a column for the date, purchases, cost of goods sold, and a balance. And eventually we're going to total some things up and get a total cost of goods sold. Now the first thing I want to do is just take this one transaction at a time. But bear in mind, the first attempt at doing this is going to be under the FIFO method. So this first version is using first in, first out method. So what are my transactions here? Well, the very first transaction is on March the 1st, and it says they had a beginning inventory of 55 units, and each one of those units costs $50 a unit. So this is on March the 1st. Now, beginning inventory, that is going to go under purchases because it's basically inventory that we purchased in the past and we had it at the beginning of the month. So we had 55 units at $50 per unit. So that's just our beginning inventory that goes under purchases. We're not selling anything on this date. So as a result, the only thing we have on this date is just those 55 units at $50. So that's our current balance of inventory. So it's literally that easy on that first date there. Now, what's the second transaction? March the 5th. On the 5th, they purchased 200 units, but this time they had to pay $54 a unit. So this is on the 5th, and this is going to go under purchases. 200 units at $54 per unit. So that's going to go under purchases on the 5th. Now down here on the balance, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to develop different layers of inventory. Every time there's a price change, we want to have these different layers. So I already have a layer of 55 units at $50 from before, and now because of this additional purchase, I have an additional layer of 200 units at 54. So like I said, every time there's a price change, we just keep building up these layers of inventory. And that's very important that we build them up that way. So that takes care of the 5th. Then on March the 9th, here's our first sale. A sale of 200 units at $80 per unit. Now, that $80, that price, that's actually the retail price. Now, I'm going to need to know that price later on when I do part 3, but for now, I'm not going to use that price. Right now, I'm trying to figure out the cost. So all I really know is that on March the 9th, I sold 200 units. So it's March the 9th. Nothing under purchases, but I am going to have something under cost of goods sold. Now, I sold 200 units. Here's the problem. Which 200 units did I sell? I've got 55 units that I paid $50 for. I've got 200 units that I paid $54 for. They're stored in the same place. I don't actually know which ones I sold. So I'm going to do this using first in, first out, or FIFO. I'm going to assume that the first units that came in are the first units that were sold. So to get my first set of units, I'm going to take them out of that first layer. So I've got a layer there of 55 units at $50 per unit. So that's going to cover that part, but that's not enough to cover the sale. I actually sold 200 units, so I need another 145 units in order to cover this sale. So that's where I'm going to have to dip into that second layer, which is at a price of $54. Now, what that's going to do to my layers of inventory, that layer of 55 units at $50 is gone, and of those 200 units that I had at 54, 145 of those are gone. So all I'm left with now are 55 units at $54. So you see how I had to peel that off. I peel it off layer by layer, first in, first out. That's the proper way to do that. So that takes care of the 9th. Then I get down here to the 18th. Another purchase, this time 65 units at $55 per unit. So this is on the 18th. This is a purchase, 65 units at $55 per unit. So what I'm going to have is that layer that I had left over from before. Still going to have that one. And I'm going to have, in addition to that, this additional layer. So now I'm going to have, again, 2 layers of inventory. 55 units at $54 and the additional 65 units at $55. The next transaction is on March the 25th. Yet another purchase. This time we bought 90 additional units, and this time we had to pay $60 per unit. So this is on the 25th. It's a purchase of 90 units at a price of $60 per unit. So again, a different price. That means it's another additional layer of inventory. So as long as we're purchasing, we just keep building up layer after layer after layer of inventory until we have a layer for every single price. Then we get down here to the final transaction, which is on March the 29th. And on that day, we sold 75 units. We sold them for $90 a unit. But remember, that's a retail price. I'm going to use that on part 3, but I don't want to use that right now. I'm trying to figure out the cost. So all I really know here is that I sold 75 units on March the 29th. So the question then is, which units did I sell? I sold 75, but which ones? Well, remember, this is FIFO, first in, first out. I'm going to peel these off one layer at a time. So I've got that top layer of 55 units at $54. That'll cover that part of it, but that's still not enough. I actually sold 75 units. I need 20 more to cover that sale. So as a result, I'm going to dip into the next layer, which is at 55. So what's that going to do to my layers? Well, the first layer is totally gone. The second layer, I had 65 units at 55. Well, 20 of those are gone. So I only have 45 units at 55. And I still have the 90 units at 60. I didn't take any of those out. So that's how things look at the end of the 29th. So now to finish up the FIFO version, I want to calculate my total cost of goods sold. I've got 4 things in that column under cost of goods sold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here below this and multiply all this out and total it up so that I can figure out my total cost. So I've got 55 units times $50. I've got 145 units times 54. I've got 55 units times 54. And I've got 20 times 55. And then I want to add all these units up. So that adds up to $14,650. So right here for my total cost of goods sold, $14,650. And that's just the sum total of all the units that I had under cost of goods sold. So that completes the first part of this. The first part of part 1 under FIFO, first in, first out. So that is one potential way to evaluate our inventory, but it's not the only way. So once we've completed FIFO, they wanted us to also, under part 1, complete this according to the LIFO method. So I'm going to do that next. Now when I switch over here to the LIFO method, this is a different method. This is last in, first out. So when I start peeling off the layers, I'm going to do that in a slightly different way. I'm going to peel the layers off from the bottom first. So it's a little bit different and I'll get a little bit different answer. Now one thing I've done here is I've left some of the same information because the purchases aren't going to change. In fact, nothing's really going to be different on this version except really the cost of goods sold. That's what's going to change. So again, to repeat this process again under LIFO, on March the 1st, we bought the 55 units at $50. So it was just a purchase, and that was our balance of inventory as of that day. And then we get down here to the next day, which was the 5th. We still have those same units, plus we have the additional layer of the 200 units at 54. So it pretty much looks exactly the same until you get all the way up here into March the 9th. So if you were to look at this compared to FIFO up to this point, everything looks identical. But here's where it starts to change. On the 9th, that's when I sold 200 units. The question is, which ones did I sell? Well, this time I'm using last in, first out. So when I peel off the different layers, I'm going to peel them from the bottom first. Well, I have enough units in that bottom layer to cover this sale. So I'm going to say that the 200 units that were sold were the 200 units at 54. I'm going to say that those are the ones that were sold. And then that layer is gone. And what do I have left? Only the 55 units at $50. Those are the only ones that I have left. So then, moving forward, I will build up additional layers of inventory. And as long as I'm just purchasing inventory, that part of it is very easy because I just keep repeating that. And I keep building that up layer after layer after layer. Very easy to do that. And like I said, every time there's a price change, that necessitates a new layer to reflect that price change. So I keep building up more and more layers. Then I get down here to the 29th, my next sale.